Thank you, Pam. It's my great pleasure to be able to introduce our guest this evening, but before I do, I would like to first introduce her husband, Jeff Landis. Jeff, if you would just stand a moment so people can see where you are. Jeff is Julia's husband. He is also an architect. He works for the firm of Coakley Williams, which is a design build firm located in Greenbelt, Maryland. And his firm specializes in multiple occupancy housing units, office buildings, and retail facilities. Welcome to Ball State, Jeff. I'm glad to have you here. Our speaker this evening is Julia Monk, who is an alumna of this college. We're very proud to say. She graduated in 1979, although I found out today that because of an errant unpaid parking fine, which some of you perhaps can relate to, she should have graduated in 1978. She has certainly, during her tenure here at Ball State, experienced a lot of changes in the college. She began her studies shortly after the college moved across the street from the Quonset huts to this building. By the time she had left Ball State, the college had grown to the point that the urban planning and landscape architecture departments were located in North Quad, and we had studios in Lucina Hall and in other locations around the campus. There's been a lot of changes, certainly in the college since that time. Julia is president of Brennan Beer Gorman Monk Interiors, with offices in New York City, in Washington, D.C., and also in Hong Kong. Her firm specializes in corporate office, hospitality, casino, retail, and health and fitness spa interior projects, with expertise in interior design and architecture, space planning, and CAD-assisted programming. Julia oversees all of the firm's interior design projects, as well as the day-to-day operations of both the New York City and the Washington offices. Jeff and Julia maintain two homes, one in Washington, D.C., and one in New York City. And as we were having lunch today, I was thinking, how do two architects handle the design and furnishing of their homes? Julia perhaps could read my mind and provided that information for me. And the obvious answer is this, that with two homes, she makes all the decisions for their home in New York City, and for their home in Washington, Jeff and Julia work together in making the decisions for that home. We've posted some of her work on the corridor to just tempt you perhaps to attend the lecture this evening. From her press releases, we learn that one of her greatest personal achievements, perhaps the one that has given her a great deal of satisfaction, is the restoration of the historic St. Regis Hotel, which is a New York City landmark, originally built in 1904 for John Jacob Astor. She will certainly be showing us a variety of projects and work of her firm this evening, and she will share with us some of her professional experiences after leaving the hallowed halls of CAP. Please join me in welcoming Julia Monk.
We'll see if this microphone works. Is it going? Okay, great. Great. It is an honor to speak here tonight, and I didn't think this honor happened as quickly as 19 years after you graduate from school. I thought this was something that happened about 40 years out of school, and I didn't expect my invitation until the year 2018. But then when I realized that most of the people in this room were younger than 4 years old the year I graduated, if they'd even yet been conceived, and I thought perhaps it is my time to share with you what my experiences have been throughout my career, which is probably as long as most of your lives have been. Also, I do remember sleeping through a few of these Monday night lectures, so if you all are too tired from too many deadlines, don't use this pose. Just go straight for it and put your head down on the top of the tablet arm. So Jeff Hall was kind enough to tell you in general what it is that I do. I am the president of Brennan Beer Gorman Monk Interiors. I'm also a minor partner in our sister company, Brennan Beer Gorman Architects. We do have offices headquartered in New York City with other offices in DC as well as Hong Kong. And between all of the firms, we have a total staff of about 150 professionals. I'd like to show you a couple examples of our projects. The kinds of things that we're currently involved in are a wide variety of different project types: the office, the hotel, the retail, and also a wide variety in terms of design style and theming in some cases. This is a movie theater, the movies that you can ride, where the seats rock and roll as you're watching the movie, and dinosaurs and all kinds of things coming at you. This was the front entrance area of that. An office project that we were responsible for in Jersey City, 101 Hudson, 600,000 square feet of office, 1,200 car park spaces at the base of the building. We're currently working on a project in Atlantic City for Caesars. We're creating ancient Rome in their renovated casino, renovated and expanded casino. We finished a retail complex in Hong Kong, Ma On Shang Plaza, which had a carnival feel. They went to New Orleans and loved the look and wanted to recreate that. Some conceptual ideas for another casino in Atlantic City for the Steel Pier. A fitness health spa that we did for Hilton in Short Hills at one of their more upscale properties. Allied Junction, one of the first train stations to be built in the New York City area, which will be in New Jersey, where the New Jersey Transit and the Amtrak trains cross, will also provide the foundations for 3 million square feet of development, which will occur on top of over the train station area. We've recently branched out into a new market. We haven't opened an office yet there, but this is in Egypt, Cairo. This is a master plan for a residential hotel complex. And in our Southeast Asian office in Jakarta, we're working on the Keraton Plaza. But when I was asked to speak tonight, I tried to put myself into your shoes. I tried to think about what would have been interesting to me back when I was in school. I thought the answers to the history test would have been good. I thought a very clever solution to my current design problem would have been great. But in a lot of ways, I really wanted to know what the future held for me. So this evening, I have a very interesting opportunity to show you what my future held 20 years ago. So let's go back to when most of you might have been a glimmer in your father's eye. Charles Sappenfield, the founding dean of our school, was the acting dean at that time. Computer science classes consisted of nothing but punch cards, and if you got one of them wrong, your entire program wouldn't work. Any design that had a shed roof and a round window guaranteed that your grade would be boosted by 1 letter. Bob Dylan was then at the top of the charts. As you know, he's back again. Jimmy Carter was president, and Laverne and Shirley in Happy Days, along with Three's Company, were gracing our television sets the first time around before Nickelodeon got a hold of them. At that time, I was beginning the 6th year of my 5-year program. I was actually, 20 years ago today, off in Europe fulfilling my ICMA Dream Scholarship, which basically allowed me to tour throughout Europe and take a look at a lot of bricks and masonry units. I was also in the middle of my thesis project then because I'd gotten out of sync somehow, big time, some way. I'd selected for my thesis project something that was a bit telling about where I was going to be going in this world, and that was a mixed-use complex of a hotel, dinner theater, and retail just outside of the Indianapolis area. Kind of a resort hotel community. But that was enough for 77. In 78, I did finally finish, even though I hadn't paid my ticket in order to earn my diploma that year. And I finished and I graduated, and I moved directly to Chicago. I love large cities, and I loved being there. Ironically, that was the same year that gambling became legal in Atlantic City, although I didn't know that yet. And we were then in the delirium of disco music. I got up to Chicago and I moved in with my dad. I'm sure he was happy to have me back. And I very selectively went through the phone book and selected 6 firms, and only 6 firms, that I would interview with. Kind of a mistake, but that's what I did. During that time, I interviewed with Stanley Tigerman, who, when he found out that I was a fellow Alpha Rho Chi recipient, kind of dissed the whole thing for me. Right after I got up there, I had one of my first of 3 interviews that I had over the next 2 years with Helmut Jahn, and at no time did he offer me a job. But also one of the other people that I met with was a man named Art Love with Welton Beckett Associates. He was a stone-faced man, and I sat there eagerly and enthusiastically continuing to show him my work from school and art projects and whatever I could come up with. And I left his office thinking, there goes another one. I don't have a job there. Through friends and so on and so forth, I took a temporary position with a firm called Cohn & Dornbusch in Chicago. It was a 6-week stint, and during the time I was there, I did a lot of design work, which was basically space planning on a school property. At the end of that 6 weeks, I did get a phone call back from Art Love, who said, we're ready to take you on at Welton Beckett Associates. My employer at Cohn & Dornbusch turned around and gave me a counteroffer and said I could stay there and be their designer. But I thought to myself that anyone that would have someone recently out of school as the designer for their architectural firm must not have very good judgment. So I left, and I went with Welton Beckett Associates. The first thing that happened when I got there was they were working on a competition for the McDonald's Corporation, and it was due in 2 days. And they sat me down and they said, we need this building section drawn. And this is where it all starts. It starts on your first job, and it starts on undertaking a task, which I'm looking at now thinking, my God, what a simple job this was to do, with all the enthusiasm and all of the power that you have to bring forward to bear on any small assignment, let alone any large assignment that you tackle later on in your life. So here is my first drawing for Welton Beckett Associates. We didn't win the competition, by the way. Other projects that we worked on the first couple of years I was out of school working with Beckett in Chicago included the hoofed animal habitat at Lincoln Park Zoo. This one was built, and it is exactly what it says, a habitat for hoofed animals. We also worked on a lot of other competitions. I had the opportunity to work on things that were international in nature. This is the Xijing Hotel in Xi'an, China, where all of the major terracotta figures were found. Due to a series of circumstances and people having left the company and not being around, I did play a major part in the design element of this. And I thought I was really smart by saying, well, let's give them something that functions like a Western hotel, but has nuances and traces of what the Asian society would have, including, this is not a colored rendering, but there's a beautiful blue-gray earth over there from which they make all of their tiles and bricks and things. So we incorporated all those things into the design. The design was taken over to China, shown to the client, and they said, what are you doing? We want a glass curtain wall building. So the project moved to our New York office at that time. But the one job that finally really got built that I had a major, major role in terms of being project designer on was this lovely emerald gem, which is in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, for a company called E.A. Jafali & Brothers. At the time that we started on this project, the economy was slowing down a little bit, and the opportunities were getting a little bit sparse in the office. But being that this job was in Saudi Arabia, the first thing that they did was they went and asked all of the, how do I say this, Christian men who were working in the office if they were interested in working on this project. They were either too busy, not interested, it really didn't matter. So the next thing they did was they offered it to the male Jewish person who was working in our office. And he, of course, had some fundamental reasons why he wouldn't work on this job, one of them being that he would never see the project. Then they came to me, the white girl, and they said, are you interested in working on this job? And I said, I will work on anything as long as it's architecture, it's design, and I can take pride of authorship in what it is that I'm doing. And we did it. It's 250,000 square feet of space. It's what the client wanted. He did want this curtain wall building over in Saudi Arabia. And it actually is, in their minds, an emerald gem on one of the main strips, Medina Highway, just outside of the downtown section of Jeddah. This was the extent of the architectural portion of the interiors that occurred on this job. This all went with the base building. The client came back and requested that we do the actual fit out of the tenant spaces. So I guess this is kind of the first liaison into my architectural interior world. So we got busy working on that. It was at a time in life, I believe, the very end of a time, where clients would come to architects and just assume if the architect did the building, they would also be doing the interiors. We were talking over dinner tonight. It was also a time when there were many entrepreneurial architects who decided that doing interiors as part of an architectural company didn't give it the underlying dedication to interiors as a discipline that clients were expecting. But we did do this one, clear down to the artwork. This piece here says Allah is Great, done by a Western artist. This is the boardroom and one of the major offices. But then 1991 came. Ronald Reagan was our president. Sandra Day O'Connor was the first woman sworn in at the Supreme Court. Di and Charles were married. And the Hyatt Regency in Kansas City collapsed. Their bridge collapsed, big, huge scandal. But it wasn't just the bridge that was collapsing that year. The economy around the Chicagoland area was also collapsing. By the end of 1981, Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, one of the largest employers of architects and engineers in the Chicago area, laid off 400 architects just before Christmas. They just recently completed a major job, the Hajj terminal over in Jakarta, and there was no new work coming down the pike. It was also during 1981 that Welton Beckett, my dearly beloved employer, decided to close down their Chicago office. Well, after I got over being devastated, they were kind enough to offer me a relocation, and they thought that LA and I would get along very, very well. So they sent me out to the Los Angeles office, where I spent a week just going around, looking at things, trying to understand the lay of the land. But it didn't take me long to figure out that if you missed the bus on your way to work the next one day, you'd have to wait till the next day to get to your office. I was not one of those people that wanted an extra set of keys and having to worry about gas and oil and all of those kind of things. So I went back and I said, would it really be an issue if I moved to the New York office? Well, my boss at the time, George Hammond, hemmed and hawed around and said, I'm not sure you want to go to New York. The people in New York are a little weird. And I said, okay, but he said, but if that's what you want to do, we'd rather keep you in the system than lose you, so if that's what you want to do, let's go ahead and do it. So I went out to New York. I got there on a Friday night. I stayed up until about 5 o'clock every morning, walking the streets of New York to make sure I'd feel safe in the big, tough city, and nothing bad happened to me. So I interviewed with Peter Gorman, who is, yes, of Brennan Beer Gorman, and he offered me a job, and I moved to New York about 3 weeks later. Ironically, when I got to the New York office, I found that the same client for whom we were finishing up our office building in Saudi Arabia was doing their headquarters right in New York City. And this is a slide of their offices there, which if you could step up on the platform and look out the window, you'd see nothing but Central Park. It's absolutely gorgeous. This is one of their offices. We started work on a lot of base buildings once I got there, some interiors, some master planning. This is Crown Plaza, which was building number 1 of a 3-building master plan down in Atlanta. A little more interiors. We worked for Lever Brothers, and you can tell how old this is by the look of that computer terminal thing that's on the desk. Great offices, but we should have left off all the accessories. The phone's kind of telling, too. But I worked on a few offices with the New York, or a few projects with the New York office before I found out that Brennan Beer and Gorman, who were the director of the office, the director of design, and the director of production for Welton Beckett in New York City, had decided it was time to hang out their own shingle. As a matter of fact, I found this out on the eve of going to Saudi Arabia. Yes, I did make 3 trips to Saudi Arabia at the invitation of the Sheikh's wife, so I saw all of the work being done over there. But I found out on the eve of my last trip over there that the three men that I respected most in this world were not going to be working at the same office when I returned, potentially. And this, of course, is the same year that Mary Lou Retton was still skinny enough and subtle enough to be a gymnast. Boy George and Annie Lennox were redefining sex for us, and Reagan himself was reelected. They invited me to join them. They left in July of this year of 84 and put up shop in David Beer's personal apartment with Hank smoking his cigars, David's back going out, and Peter Gorman just wondering what he should do with all of his nervous energy. And I refused to join them until they had an office. They took an office space at Madison and 53rd in New York, and about 3 days later I joined them, which was a good thing. And we had a lot of fun, and we did a lot of great projects. The Portal site was a design competition in Washington, D.C. It was comprised of about 2 million square feet of development of office, hotel, waterfront property. We actually got Rouse involved and kind of broke all the rules and brought this project all the way out to the waterfront in Washington, which is something that doesn't exist very gracefully there now, with the exception of one project. We brought with us, eventually, a client that had been working with Peter Gorman at Welton Beckett Associates in the design of Buena Vista Palace, which is a large major hotel resort community down in Disney World. This is the Xerox Center. Again, it was a client who was originally with Beckett, but we insisted that the client stay with Beckett. We didn't want to be stealing clients from them. There's enough to go around in this world. But they did insist that David Beer be responsible for the design of this building. So we coordinated that back and forth between our two offices. We were also involved in the master plan of the Colgate site, which is directly across from the World Trade Center in New York City. This is a 47-acre master plan, of which the first building, 101 Hudson, I showed you in one of the earlier slides, is already complete. And we also worked on buildings whose slides don't fall all the way down in the machine. Key Corp in Albany, New York, for which we did not only the exterior of the building, but the interior of the building. And as luck would have it, there were more interiors. And I think that this project, Stanford Government Center, happened on the eve of when my partners decided it was finally time to make a definite, dedicated statement to our clients that interior design is a distinct part of our world and our discipline. At the conclusion of this job, in 1987, 9 years after I graduated, I got the big lunch. And Hank, David, and Peter all took me out to lunch, and they invited me to become a partner with Brennan Beer Gorman. I was the first partner of my generation to be named or invited into this fraternity of older guys, which I thought was really kind of cool. But they didn't make the decision easy for me. They gave me two choices. One is that I could be a very small partner in an architectural company which already existed and already had billings, backlog, the whole thing. Or I could be an equal partner in an interior design company which was yet to be formed. So I called my dad, and I had lots of conversations with him, and finally decided that it was worth the risk. I really didn't have much to lose. If I did it and it was not successful, they always said I was welcome back into the architectural company at that smaller percentage. But if it was successful, who knew? So there we were, getting all organized to be an interior design company. And the first thing that happens is one of our favorite clients comes along and says, we want to do this project and only Julie can do it, but it's architectural in nature. So what do we say? Fine, no problem. If you look at the building on the left, you'll see what was at that time the Sheraton City Square. This is right downtown in New York City. And there were a whole series of laws that were about ready, or developer advantages that were about ready to be revoked in Manhattan, the sunset laws, which allowed developers to basically build 3 times, would allow on this particular site, 3 times additional area on top of the project. So what you're actually seeing on the right, what's this pointer's for? Up to this level is that level of building. And our client here was ITT Sheraton, and a guy who had a lot of imagination, our client Ron Wackrow, decided that we already own the building, we own the land, why tear everything down and start over again just to maximize our FAR? Let's just put a new building on top of the old building, which is what this is. Essentially, in order to create this structure, this Verendale truss was put in, wrapping the face of the existing construction, foundations going all the way to the ground, and then we're just going to put a new hotel on top, have it enter from the other street, elevator service up to the lobby, and no one would ever know. Problem was, they had a partner, and the partner didn't think it was such a good idea, and they wouldn't share in the risks, so the project never went ahead. All the extra FAR was gone forever. After that project died, there's still an interiors company out here someplace doing whatever it's doing, but these other opportunities keep coming along. This project came along, and this, to me, was and still is one of the greatest projects I think I'll ever be involved in my entire life. This is the St. Regis Hotel that Mr. Hall was referring to earlier. This is obviously an old photograph, and it shows the original structure of the St. Regis, which was a home away from home built for all of the European travelers coming to New York City. Basically, almost all the rooms, with the exception of the top rooms, which were held aside for the maids and all of the assistants, were done in a suite-type concept so that everyone could come in with all of their possessions and basically move into New York for a few months at a time. And this was built in 1904. In 1927, long after John Jacob Astor drowned in the Titanic and other tragic things occurred, another management company, Duke Management, came along and said, okay, this has been really successful, we're making lots of money, let's put an addition on. So everything that you see from here over, which is a little difficult to pick up from this particular shot, but one of the few shots that shows both buildings together, it was done much more streamlined, not only on the outside, but also on the inside as well. The whole project started because it became law in New York City that you had to put in a life safety system, sprinklers, smoke detectors, and all that kind of thing. And Sheraton's partner at the time decided that they needed to do this. They had to meet the laws until they went in to start installing all of these things, and they discovered that in the scratch coat of the plaster in the 1904 wing was asbestos. So instead of having a simple little $1 million life safety job going into this building, all of a sudden they had a project with undetermined costs. Sheraton saw it as an opportunity. They bought their partner out. Right about the same time in 1988, Landmarks was whispering that they were going to turn this into a landmark. They'd already been foiled by developers directly across the street from this project with the renovation of the Peninsula Hotel, where they took out arched windows, replaced them with square windows, and just basically botched up what was a very, very beautiful Beaux-Arts building. So Sheraton embraced the entire idea of creating this or making this into a landmark, and that became part of our design criteria from the very get-go. Now, the Landmarks Commission, just so you understand, in New York City, their jurisdiction is the facade of the building and what can be seen from the outside. It does not encompass the interior of the project whatsoever. So a good portion of our project was to restore the exterior, put new lighting on the exterior, and so on and so forth. This is the revolving door that was part of the 1904 building, which was obviously restored. But it turned out that once we got into the inside of the property, in order to make this a living landmark, we really only restored and preserved 5% of the floor area. So you have the facade that was restored and the floor area, 5% of the floor area that was restored. And I'll show you why in a few minutes. Part of our project on the exterior was taking this landmark and bringing it into today's day and age in terms of function as well as look. Originally, there were shops along here, so the whole idea and attitude of hospitality was not so significant along this portion. But also the whole idea or the whole street facade of this being a hotel to passersby was very limited in terms of the overall length of the building. So we worked very closely with the Landmarks Commission in redesigning that facade, adding more piers, doing all these kind of things to make it, I guess, recreate something that could have been there originally had the functions been different back then. But this is what the 1927 portion of the project looked like on the interior. And yes, they let me take all the before shots because I take really bad shots, but this is kind of typical of what was there. People say, why didn't you restore it? And there wasn't much here worth saving. The style was very inconsistent with the portions of the work that were built originally in 1904. So we made it our job to recreate what we felt or what we believed should have been there originally. And this is the after. You'll notice changes in ceiling height. We've removed slabs, we've lifted floors up, we've added in detail. We've created columns where they didn't exist before. This was one of the few jobs where we actually removed a beam and put a column back in. Normally we want to get the columns out of there. This low ceiling space was the entry into their fine dining restaurant and bar when we found the property in 1988. Notice the low ceiling height. They would bring tables out here for spillover space for cocktails and things, although I could never figure out why anyone would want to sit here. This is about as romantic as it got. So once again, taking out a floor slab, you can see clearly where we've added the additional height to the room. We commissioned the murals that you see around the top, which represent beauty, harmony, and the four seasons. All of the chandeliers, everything that you see in this photograph is new and was built between 1989 and 1991. We had craftsmen coming from Italy to set all of the balustrades, to set the floor, to make it as authentic as we could. But again, we weren't restoring, we were recreating a vision of what we thought it should be. A portion of our challenge on this project was one wonderful mural by Maxfield Parrish. It had had many lives. It started in John Jacob Astor's Knickerbocker Hotel in its original life, and finally found its way into a warehouse for 20 years or so. When someone discovered it, they put it into a French-style restaurant, which was inappropriate for this wonderful, wonderful mural. So we designed the entire bar around it, going with the dark woods, even though we were pretty much in a French setting. And there's a great story for it, and when you all come to New York, I'll take you to the King Cole Bar and buy you a cocktail and tell you about the mural. Meeting room space, again, this is what we found in a lot of the meeting rooms when we started on the project. They'd just been bastardized and butchered up. Someone's idea of solving the problem was to put in what is there a reflective ceiling prism structure to try to make the space feel a little bit higher and a little bit more opulent, I guess. But we changed that. We brought it back to where we thought it should be. Again, some of the moldings in this room were borrowed from other moldings that did exist in the property, recast, stretched, reshaped, and brought back together again. And the ballroom, which is a very famous social venue in New York City, went through many generations on this project. One was to turn it into condominiums, co-ops, additional guest rooms, and that worked until my partner David Beer accidentally sat next to the wife of the chairman of ITT, not knowing who she was, said, "You can't believe what they're doing at the St. Regis." And the next day we got a phone call that it would remain a ballroom. But this is what it was like in its terribly pink decorated days. We tried to keep the essence of the room. The dome ceiling is still there, but there were more systems that needed to be. I don't know how clearly you can see it, but the ceiling was literally Swiss cheese when we started on this project. And we went back and reorganized, added a cove, dealt with all of the systems integration within the space. The speakers are actually those little decorative details and motifs that you see there, and so on and so forth, but really brought it back to where it could be New York's #1 social ballroom. The guest rooms were a challenge. People wonder why we didn't keep all of the walls. We totally demolished everything on all the guest room levels, because this is just not acceptable to a 5-star property look. So not only did we take the walls out, we also did a 3-for-2 conversion in a portion of the project where we took what was 3 rooms and created 2 rooms out of it. So we'd be able to create rooms of a size that were indicative of this project. We actually went from about 474 guest room keys when we started the project to 363 when we finished. He's working on it. Help. And interestingly enough, we've continued working on this project now since it was completed, and we've gone on to further reduce the key count on the property. Keys are sellable units. They're different from rooms. It might be that you've got 2 bays to create 1 key. That would be a 1-bedroom suite, but you're unable to sell those in any other way than 1 key or one 1-bedroom suite. So we've come back because people like Cher wanted to have 1-bedroom suites and so on and so forth. The Arabs came over, absolutely loved the project, decided to take the presidential suite for 3 months. There was no presidential suite left over. So we started customizing and renovating since this job was completed in 1991 to meet their client demand and to meet the demand of what people are willing to pay a lot of money for in New York City. It really looks great. Can you imagine the brasserie, the draperies, the whole thing there? It's really gorgeous. Huh? I think that's what they're trying to do. Well, I guess I'll go on to the punchline about this job, and then we can go back and take a look at the guest rooms and the bathrooms if we can solve the technical difficulties. The job looks really great. The befores and afters are really terrific. But of any one project in my entire life, I've never been so embarrassed when we finished this job because it was so over budget and so behind schedule that it was really the talk of the industry for the longest time. Sheraton was a little bit like this about the whole thing. As designers, everybody in New York seemed to know the whole story that, oh yeah, it may look good, but over budget, beyond schedule, what do you have to say for it? Well, it takes a team to do that, just like it takes a team to get it done on time and on schedule. But as the time went by, I started raising my head up a little bit more. And it wasn't until I was on a trip in Southeast Asia and I met with a Sheraton man. We were over there trying to sell our services. And he brought up the St. Regis, and I thought, oh no, here it goes again. We're going to have to talk about that budget and that schedule. And so I held my breath, and all of a sudden I heard him saying something totally different. And he said, you know, that project has taken this chain someplace where we've never been before. It's put us on the map. He said, I don't know what it's doing for Sheraton stateside and domestically, but what it's done for us here on an international market is changed our entire client base. All of a sudden, people, world travelers, were beginning to look at Sheraton as a first-class luxury property. And they've gone on. I mean, I guess to some degree it's very important what we do as designers and the product that we create as we put projects together. But it really doesn't matter if they can't service and keep up the project as well as you designed it and as well as you conceived it. And I think in terms of this project from beginning to end and even to where we are right now on this job, and I'm still as proud of it today as I was back in 1991 when I was over my embarrassment. But it took a team to bring that project together, and it also takes a team to maintain the class and elegance of a project, especially one like the St. Regis. And so now what had been a very embarrassing moment for me in my career, and one I thought I would never get over, it's all turned around. You know what? Why don't we just go to New York and look at the rooms? Oh, dare I go backwards? Okay. You're not going to see this room tonight. It's really beautiful. Okay, this was the condition of the bathrooms when we started on the project. And again, what's the question? Why don't you keep what's there? When the St. Regis was built in 1904, to have indoor plumbing was quite a great thing. As a matter of fact, they set standards in terms of they had a central system for conditioning the air. They had a central vacuum system. They did have indoor plumbing in all of the rooms, but this was not sufficient for today's demanding traveler and sophisticated guest. So once everything was ripped out and we put it back together again, working around the columns and the window spacing that we had, This was a typical bathroom that was created. Typically 5 fixtures, separate shower, compartmentalized toilet, double sink, and the soaking tub, all done in marbles. And again, an effort to keep the detailing traditional. We didn't run the marble all the way up the wall. That might be opulent to some people. We stopped everything at a wainscot height and brought back in wall covering to create a more domestic feel rather than a commercial feel. Okay, this is the part where I say I was really embarrassed and everything. We do continue to go on with this client. 1992, there was one space left that we hadn't touched when we finished the project, and that was an empty area down on the lower level, which they were holding aside to get a club from London or someplace like Annabelle's to come in and take over the space. They were unsuccessful in finding a partner to take over this area, but the meeting rooms themselves upstairs had been so successful they wanted us to create more. So in '92 we came back and did this suite of rooms, which is La Maisonette. Again, everything you see here is new. We did borrow some molding casts and that kind of thing, but it's all new. And then in '94 we went back, and the chef that they had hired with his brand new kitchen wasn't satisfied, and as soon as he got his 4 stars, he got a $2 million kitchen. And this is what a $2 million kitchen looks like. But not all clients work hand in hand with you the way we have with Sheraton over the years, particularly in the St. Regis Hotel. We do get other kinds of clients, and the most interesting and probably the most frustrated are the clients that are just families, and families that have an ego investment into their project, and not just something where they want to do something that looks great but also makes good financial sense. And that's what we ran across here when we were doing the Sherry Netherlands. The Sherry Netherlands is an entire residential co-op building. The clients that we worked for owned 34 apartments within this. When they sold the co-op facilities, they did sell them with the rights that they could be rented out as hotel rooms in a transient, less than 30-day situation. So we first started our work with the mother. And she came in, she was very clear about what she wanted, soft greens, this is great. And our whole idea here was to create something that looked like a New York Fifth Avenue apartment, not like a hotel room, something that was very residential, something that had full appointments. These rooms were going for pretty top dollars. So we designed a mock-up room, which these are the photographs of. 1 out of the 34 rooms was mocked up, which is quite an expensive venture to go through. However, she wanted to know exactly what it was she was going to get in her other 34 rooms. So we'd signed off, you know, we're going to change the drapery a little bit here, fix the air conditioning thing over there, do whatever we were going to do. And her son and stepson came in. And he said, I don't know what you guys think you're doing, but I'm going to inherit these rooms someday, and I don't like them. So, back to the drawing board. So instead of this soft, very feminine green look, Randy loved Ralph Lauren. So we went out shopping with Randy. We went through the whole thing one more time and created another set of mock-up rooms. So now they've got 34 units. 2 of them have been mocked up, one in the mom scheme, one in the stepson scheme. And the father, husband, comes over and he's looking through and he likes them both. And I'm thinking, that's really great. And he looked at me and he goes, well, which one should I pick? And I was standing there with 3 or 4 other people from my office because this had been going on far too long and we all wanted to know what the outcome was going to be. And I just looked at everyone on my staff and I said, if anyone offers an opinion, you're fired. So they went out and hired a hotel company to come in and do the judging. And of course it was a man, so they chose the Ralph Lauren scheme. We finished the job and it was all done. Another one of these kind of one-shot clients is what I call them because they have one project to do. I think they really have one project to do in their lives, and they're great to work for, but again, there's a lot of ego involved in all of these kind of things. And for a company that prides themselves in repeat work, it's real difficult when you know this is the one and only time that you're going to get to do something. This was a hotel that we did in Great Neck, Long Island. The building was originally built for condominiums, went belly up during one recession or the other. The city ended up actually owning it, and they auctioned it off, and our clients picked it up. And it was an interesting way to reshape a residential building with 8-foot ceiling heights in the lobby into a hotel experience. But my biggest comment about this project is we did not have project meetings with this client. We had group therapy sessions. It was a nightmare, but it got done. It got done. So then, 1992, Bill Clinton was elected for president the first time. Ruth Ginsburg was named the second woman on the Supreme Court, and David Letterman moved to CBS. But in addition to all of that, the bottom really dropped out of our market in New York City. There was nothing going on. You'd hear horror stories of major, great firms in the city just laying off almost everybody, rock bottom kind of thing. And we had to take a few hits ourselves, and it's really a painful thing. If anybody in this room ever gets laid off, I want you to know from the boss's side of the thing, it's just as painful to have to make tough decisions when you've got great employees involved. But we looked around and there was nothing to go on. There was nothing going on in New York City, and we decided that we'd go elsewhere. So we went to Southeast Asia. The market was great. There's a lot going on over there. They've got a lot of money to spend. They're developing projects like we haven't done here since the middle of the 80s. And it was a real opportunity to keep the staff that we had and grow the staff that we had back to where we had all of those valuable people back, but also allow them to continue their personal development with the scale of projects that I think a lot of architects are interested in working on. This project is in Jakarta. It's the Sudirman Central Business District, and it includes the Stock Exchange, Conrad Hotel, retail, housing, and an additional Jakarta Financial Tower, additional office building. And this is one of the office buildings nearing completion. But of course, you just don't like fly out to Southeast Asia and say, oh, here I am, give me a job, please. We were very lucky in how we got out there. Actually, and this is one to keep in mind, it was an ex-employee of ours in the New York office whose wife had gone to Hong Kong to pursue an entrepreneurial course in some college there. He went with her and has turned around and ended up being our client. And he invited us over to participate in a competition for the new peninsula in Bangkok. We had 10 days to put our entry together. We competed with 4 other international design firms. It was a no-name competition. When the judges were looking at it, they didn't know whose scheme it was or who the architects were. And this was the winning scheme. 5 days later, we were over negotiating our contract and beginning work on this property, which is still being built. Let's see, that was 92. It had been going on 5 years before we got there, and now it's still going on where we are right now. But Bangkok is a wonderfully romantic place, even though it's a little bit sleazy. But we were able to, really develop an entire experience here. But that makes it good, in terms of the entry to the hotel, and so on and so forth, leading out to the water. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with Bangkok, but one of the best hotels in the world is the Oriental, and it's located directly across the river from this piece of property. But the good news was that in seeking our work in Southeast Asia, we also found work at home. For the same client, we did the Sutton Hotel. Again, this was a structure that was there. The facade was there, the floor slabs were there, but there was nothing on the inside. It was a property that had been on the market for a long, long time under a great deal of controversy, because a lot of people wanted to come in and put a transient hotel, which means you can stay 1 night, 2 nights, and very few people were willing to live with the limitation that this was zoned for non-transient or a minimum of 30 days stay. Well, the Peninsula Group saw this as being a tremendous advantage. They've gobbled up the property, and we got busy on the whole thing. The outside, as we do in a lot of our renovation work, we limited our work to the lower floor, the lower 2 floors, or wherever it is the pedestrian can really grasp and understand the quality of the project. And then above, of course, it's all clean. It has new windows, but we don't necessarily go back and try to create additional moldings or lintels or sills on the property. And then, of course, the canopy statement is always very important, particularly in a hospitality project. But this is the lobby that we created from slabs and beams. The step-down existed in the original project. However, it was one where you walked in the door and stepped down immediately. We created the interim platform so that you wouldn't feel that you were going down into the space, but rather around and through the space. And then the units themselves were done in a couple of color schemes. There were studios, one-bedrooms, two-bedroom units within the property. Because their clientele would be, or they anticipated a lot of Asians coming to the property, we did, to some degree, take care that the feng shui was proper for the rooms in terms of beams over the beds and that kind, in a very basic way. We also did work for them over in Hong Kong. This was, again, a before photograph that I took of their main first floor food and beverage outlets. They had several all-day restaurants, specialty restaurants, that kind of thing. And this was the before look when we got there. It was a little bit too stuffy and a little bit too formal for them, even though they just completed this project 5 years earlier. And we came back in and really created a veranda for them, which indeed is what this space was screaming to be. But I guess it looks like we do a lot of traditional work, and that's not really the case. I think our style has always been based on what our client's vision of the work is. The St. Regis spoke for itself. We had too many visual cues in the 1904 wing as to what that property should be about. The veranda, the previous example that I showed you, was to be a veranda. It doesn't mean it's modern, it doesn't mean anything, but it's a veranda. You could see the colonial people walking through the space when it was completed. But the same comes true if we've got other wilder clients or far-out clients or more contemporary clients. And I think a cross-section, I'm going to run through a few restaurants that we've worked on here. A cross-section of our restaurants will give you an idea of all the different styles that we work in. This was Vernon's Jerk Paradise, the jerk Jamaican cuisine. He actually made his own sauce and everything. And we did this entire space on a shoestring, small restaurant for Vernon. An Italian bistro restaurant in Washington, D.C. An American bistro where the client said, I just want it to look like it's been there for years and it smells of beer. C'est la vie, a French bistro. The restaurant for a Ramada up in Burlington where there's lots of cold weather and skiing going on. Oh, Burlington, Vermont, thank you. Jinga, a Korean restaurant in Washington, D.C. Gaddy's, a formal French restaurant. This was in the peninsula in Hong Kong. And then the Veranda Bar. So hospitality work is my big love. We also do corporate interiors and then a whole variety of other specialty types. And I'll run you through a few examples of those. Parsons Brinkerhoff, which is a 100-year-old engineering company in New York City. This is their headquarters, and their charge to us was to create something that looked like it had been around for 100 years, but also something solid and substantial that it could also be around for the next 100 years. Bristol Myers Squibb, the pharmaceuticals company, we worked with them in developing their new standards for all of their offices. Some of our high-tech stuff, this is the transporter building, or the transporter project that I showed you earlier, that movies you can ride. This is waiting room number 2. Health spas, the Hilton Spa, Sheraton in New York, check-in area as well as the workout space. And one of my favorite clients, the World Wrestling Federation, Titan Sports. We redid their headquarters for them, or created a headquarters for them in Stamford, Connecticut. They had been in several different facilities, and they had to merge. They wanted to merge into one. They bought an old building, renovated it. They had a designer that was not working out for them or not taking them creatively where they felt they needed to go for their image. And they asked us to take a look first at redoing their lobby, the public entry lobby space, which we came in and did, and once again removed a few slabs and knocked their socks off. And then they asked us to stay on and do all the rest of their spaces. And this is the lounge area to the fitness center and the fitness center itself. everything had to be bigger than life. And it wasn't until the last day, and I didn't go on this last trip up to the job site, but the group was standing in the cafeteria and Hulk walked in. There's one thing I wanted to do throughout the entire job was to meet him. We dabble in a lot of different projects. This was a gallery that we did for a Japanese client right on Park Avenue. They opened with this show. They had one more show, and then they closed. Couldn't quite make it. They turned it into a glasses store. This is called reuse of space, and left it pretty much the way you see it as it is, minus the artwork and plus a lot of eyeglasses. But the next generation didn't make it. They've now just recently demolished the space and they're starting over from scratch, which I think is a real pity. For the same client, we also did an apartment in the museum tower. Again, they wanted to illustrate and show off all of their artwork within this space. We have a flexible track system working around the room so they can change the pieces of art as things come and things go as they're sold. They were wonderful clients. They had a pair of Franklin Wright doors that had to be worked into the design of the space. When the gallery went belly up, so did the ownership of the apartment. But we did hear that when it finally sold, it was the most expensive cost per square foot in New York City. So that made us kind of proud of that. We do a lot of tech space. We work with Sprint. We develop this telecommunications training center for them. This is a post-production studio that we did for a small group in Washington called Sound Waves. Whenever you see a lot of color and painted walls, it means we had a low budget, generally. That's what we call tricks and sheetrock, trying to get big bang for our buck. So now it's 1997. Yes, this is almost over. Bob Dylan is back. Yes is taking a tour. They were my favorite band when Bill Clinton's back in, or still in the office. And I'll just show you a few more projects that we're currently working on. This is a lousy photograph, and I did not take it. Somebody else did. This is the Plaza Hotel in New York City. I'm sure it's a landmark that most people have heard of. The reason it's in here is because I think in terms of a level of sophistication and client base that we've been able to attain in the 10 years that the interiors company has been in business, but then also in the 19 years that I've been practicing, this project made me very proud because it is a project of such renown, and it was a project in which we were entrusted to care for by a new owner, Fairmont, who's come in once the Trumps were no longer in power at this place. And our charge was to renovate 750 of their guest rooms, taking everything back to a very simple French style. Oh, pretend you're at the St. Regis. And with the ceiling height, this job was great because everything in these rooms was restored. It was in beautiful condition when we got there, and it was primarily a job of doing very clever decorating, not so much of interior architecture and design. And for the small rooms, we came up with a choral scheme that would really sing of sunshine. We continue to work with Sheraton, and like I said before, repeat business is the best thing that you can possibly have in this world. And this was a project that we just recently completed for them in New York City, the Sheraton Russell, which was a small 200-room property. But we're also doing some things we hadn't been doing before. We entered to create a sports bar at the Sheraton New York in Manhattan, and I think our invitation was a bit gratuitous, but we decided we'd show them. Basically, this round structure that you see here at the base of the building was in existence, and they wanted to put a sports bar in here. But a sports bar to Sheraton up until this point meant that you had some banners on the wall, and you served a lot of beer, and you had lots of TV screens so you could serve for the games. And since it was a competition, and since we had, I guess, nothing better to do, we decided we were going to take them someplace they had never been before. And that was to create an interactive sports bar complex. And I wish I had the model here because this is very difficult to do through slides. But basically, instead of just fooling around with the ground floor of this property, we decided that we'd go one floor down and all of the floors up, and then continue through the roof and up to the sky. What you're seeing through the model is a cross-section of what's going on here, kind of, and looking down through all of the excitement in a series of different spaces. And the three four key items that we brought to this as a sports bar were: one, the highest rock climbing wall, man-made artificial rock climbing wall, which you can see starts way down here someplace and then comes up through the building and was intended to scale the side of this 50-story building. Of course, you don't drink and go do this. You have to take a sobriety test and everything before you can even get close. We had on the ceiling of this area here a skydiving simulator. Once again, you had to get through that through the fitness center, not through the bar. But everyone would be able to watch you doing these activities, and when you were done, then you can go back down and drink with your friends. We had a basketball court, which was accessible from the bar in this location, and then we had a kayaking simulator downstairs in the actual fitness center itself. Well, we presented this design competition entry to them, and we had it all set up, and we went way over the top. The model was there and everything. And we didn't hear from them for the longest time. Nobody heard anything from them. And finally one day, I guess they decided that they had the guts to show this to the guy who was in charge, and they set up a special meeting, and we showed it to him, and he absolutely loved it. So we continued on with the design. We completed, it's changed structurally from what's here, but the basic elements of what's here remained in the project. We finished all of the working drawings. We checked our insurance to make sure that we could survive any kind of accident that might happen with taxis on 7th Avenue, watching instead of driving. And we're all set to go. And then fate stepped in the way, and Hilton made a takeover bid on Sheraton, and everything went on hold. So we're waiting to see the outcome of our fate here, but it's a lot of fun. I showed you a model earlier of this project, which is Caesars in Atlantic City. This is the actual, one of the original renderings. Again, this was a design competition that we won, but this is a recreation of the Forum. You can see the edge of the Coliseum over to the side, the Forum building, Temple Bar in the background, Caesar and his group everywhere within the space, and the world's largest drapery, 38 stories high. So, we're doing a lot of fun things. Our newest project that we just started on about 3 weeks ago is going to be a fantastic project because we're going to get to recreate something no one's ever seen before, and that is that we were awarded the Aladdin Casino Hotel in Las Vegas, right on the Strip. And there we have to recreate in a physical environment the 1001 Nights, not the Aladdin that we've all seen Walt Disney coming up with lately. So theming has lately become a very big part of our life. I guess I want to open it up to questions. I'll tell you anything that you want to know about what's been going on, but this is kind of what my future held 20 years ago. It's been exciting. Someone asked me earlier today in one of the design studios, what would I do differently if I could pick something? I don't know that there is. You just tackle every problem that's put in front of you and tackle it with a vengeance, and good things happen. It's when you start holding back and thinking that you're not getting the right opportunities that I think you start closing off what those opportunities to yourself may be as you move forward. So, thank you very much.